4 years ago, I started dating my current husband, Robert, who at the time worked with me at the same company. He had recently been hired while I held the position of manager, having started working there long before that. The company had a strict policy against romantic relationships between colleagues, but we both felt a strong attraction, and when we made our relationship official, we decided to inform the Human Resources Department. To our surprise, the company accepted it with the condition that we maintain a professional relationship at work. At that time, Robert was living with his parents, and we all had a good relationship. His mother, Catherine, was incredibly kind and respectful to me, almost as if I were her own daughter. She gave me considerable things and always knocked on the door before entering the room when I was there. She was sure we would have a good time, an excellent mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship, especially because she also expressed her desire for it to be that way. Robert had told me early about his ex, Gianna. They both dated before he and I met, but Catherine still loved her very much. Apparently, things didn't work out between them, and they ended up being just friends. When I met Gianna, I was a bit cold but polite because I found it strange that she and Robert had dated and were now friends. Robert had other friends with whom he sent messages, but with Gianna, I met frequently. Gianna was very nice to me and included me in her activities like movie nights or trips to the show, which allowed me to get closer and understand that she never felt anything romantic for Robert. Although I appreciated her efforts to include me, I noticed something different in Robert's interaction with her. His behavior changed, and he made silly jokes to make her laugh. He listened to her intensely and seemed really excited to see her. Robert used to insist that I dye my brown hair like Gianna, even though I'm blonde. He also suggested that I dress like her. That wasn't my style, but he always mentioned her accomplishments, even during our dates, which bothered me. But I thought maybe I was reading too much into her comments. Catherine, Robert's mother, was also obsessed with Gianna. She told me that Gianna was the daughter of an old friend and that she had always wanted her son to be with her. The way he talked about Gianna made me feel like I was just a second choice to his son. One night, Robert invited me to a game night, but then I found out he had invited Gianna too. Luckily, she canceled on him, alleging a date. This angered Robert, who started drinking and saying that no one was good enough for her. At that moment, we were both drinking, and without thinking, I asked him directly if he still had feelings for Gianna. Robert tried to deny it, but I continued to persist with her. If not, I would have ended him. Then he admitted it and confessed that he had always been in love with her, but that Gianna had rejected him repeatedly. Robert explained to me how their mothers had tried to force a relationship between them. Although Gianna never felt the same way, they decided to remain friends. But when I asked him if he was still in love, his silence was silent. It was enough of an answer for me, and I realized that he did not want to be in the middle of that situation. He was clearly in love with his best friend, so I prepared to leave. At that moment, he seemed to realize his mistake and began to apologize, claiming that I had pressured him to admit everything and that he was too drunk to understand what he was saying. However, his excuses did not matter to me, and I called an Uber to return home that day. I cried myself to sleep because I had believed that Robert and I would have a future together. The next day, I woke up to several missed calls from Robert and Gianna. Robert sent me messages apologizing, declaring his love, and asking why I had missed work. Gianna also wrote to me indicating that I had told her everything and wanted to talk to me. I decided to apply for sick leave from work for medical reasons, since after the terrible night before, I felt despondent. I arranged to meet with Gianna that night to talk. Gianna assured me that she had absolutely no romantic feelings for Robert, explaining the insistence of his mother's and how unhappy he was during their relationship. She suggested that he might be confused and that if his friendship made me uncomfortable, I was walking away from him. In the end, Talking to her brought me peace of mind and a better understanding of everything that happened. Gianna validated my feelings and encouraged me to talk to Robert at least one more time. He assured me that he would respect my decision, whether to forgive him or leave him. I honestly didn't expect him to be so understanding and kind. After a few days of reflection, during which I ignored Robert at work and he respected my need for space, I decided to give him a chance to explain himself. He came to my house, and as I listened carefully to his words, Robert admitted his confusion and the mistakes he had made, explaining the complex story with Gianna. He apologized for what happened that night and shared that after days of reflection, he had realized how much he loved me and that his feelings for Gianna were a thing of the past. He expressed his regret for trying to mold me into someone I wasn't and for comparing me to Gianna. He emphasized how much he loved me and his willingness to work on our relationship if I decided to forgive him. His sincere words convinced me, and I decided to give him a second chance. I demanded that he keep his distance from Gianna and that any future meeting would be in a group. Gianna understood the situation and committed to respecting our decision in the following months. Robert and I worked hard to regain trust and strengthen our relationship. We improved communication by addressing any insecurity or concern that arose. It was not an easy path, but with patience and commitment, our bond was strengthened. He made a significant effort to change his behavior and overcome the past. We began to share new experiences that reinforced our love and created exclusive memories. In the middle of this process, Robert's mother began to show strange behavior. When Robert's mother found out that he and Gianna were no longer friends, she reacted angrily and warned him about the consequences of cutting ties with his oldest friend. Although she did not know the whole story, she began to blame me for getting in the way of Robert's life when she noticed that he and I were serious. Her attitude was never directly rude, but she made indirect comments about me, criticizing my actions or suggesting that I could find someone better. She tried to disguise them as jokes, but her words made me feel uncomfortable. Everything got worse when Robert proposed to me a year ago at the traditional Thanksgiving party. My then-fiancé couldn't stop complimenting my outfit. At one point, he turned to his mother and asked if she didn't think my outfit was beautiful. His mother coldly responded that I could have dressed better. Her attitude worsened with cruel comments, like calling me a fat cow or saying I was ruining meetings with Robert. Robert thought they were jokes, but as they became more frequent and personal, he also began to see the real problem. He reprimanded her when she crossed the line, but this only caused arguments where she accused him of being too sensitive or having changed. I never understood the reason for her hostility towards me. One day, while we were discussing wedding plans, I told him that he would soon be mine when we were married. His mother laughed and commented that it would be that way until marriage. The response caught us both off guard. I felt uncomfortable, and Robert let her know how inappropriate it was. She always used to be all over me, constantly asking me about my work schedule and dropping not-so-subtle hints to Robert like, "Let's meet up when she's at work. We can do this when she's not there." It was like she had a weird power struggle with me, and I would like to get away from his son's life. Every time we went out, she had the habit of putting herself in the middle of Robert and me. I swear she even cut me off to be by his side, and don't get me started on how she reacted when we gave each other a kiss. We did it with class, of course, but she acted like it was the end of the world and told me I shouldn't do all those things in public. The invasion of personal space was unreal. She would put her hands on Robert and I would have to sneak away. The decisions and plans we made every Friday when she was at work, she would text us to find out our plans, as if she were somehow involved in our relationship. When I would talk about something related to us, she always had to say no. She knew him better and was involved in all the conversations we had, competing for his attention. Robert and I were tickling each other. She would come over and start touching him and telling him how she missed him when he was a child and she could have him to herself. Alone, she had no limits, and I couldn't stand her. When we finally got married, she gave a speech about herself during the ceremony, about how she had sacrificed so much to have a son and raise him as a gentleman. We had also invited Gianna to our wedding, and it was a pleasure to see her. Since she had come with her boyfriend for so long and congratulated us on our wedding, my mother-in-law then insisted that my husband and Gianna take a photo together for old time's sake, and told everyone how much she had always wanted to have Gianna as a daughter-in-law. Honestly, it was very embarrassing. And in the end, my father-in-law had to escort a drunk mother-in-law out of the premises because she wouldn't shut up. Later, when we went on our honeymoon, my husband asked his mother to only contact us for emergencies and assured her that we would respond to her messages when we could. Well, that simple request set off a whole spiral, and she left with the entire family crying and stating that my husband had broken her heart and that she no longer cared about her poor mother now that I was married. When I was about 3 weeks away from giving birth to my first baby, my mother-in-law texted my husband asking about the birth plan. He told her we would be alone in the delivery room. My mother and I were planning to send him a message when our son was born, so she could come meet him. Well, that simple explanation set off a storm. She became furious. She accused my husband of pushing her away and stated that we prioritize my family over hers, which couldn't be further from the truth. In reality, we actually see more of his family than mine, so I have no idea where she got that idea from. To make things more confusing, she called my husband and said, "I have to get used to the fact that now I have to share you not only with a wife, but also with a son." I had a hunch that it was jealousy. It was not the first time she showed signs of it. She had also made a rude comment to my mother at the baby shower that we celebrated a few weeks before. She told everyone how well I had raised my husband, and that's why she should be my baby's favorite grandmother instead of my mother. It may have been a joke, but my mother was a little hurt by the comment. When my husband told her on the phone that it would only be my mother and me in the delivery room, she responded, like, "That's not how your wife should treat me. I should be a better daughter-in-law." My mother-in-law was in the room with me when I gave birth. My husband stood firm and told her, "Well, that was your story." At the time of the birth, this decision was hers. I supported her. A few months ago, she told me that she wanted me to call her Nanny, leaving the title of grandmother for my mother. It seemed like she was still trying to be the favorite grandmother, but she didn't realize that I was distancing myself from her. Her controlling and manipulative tendencies made it difficult for me to be around her throughout the Preggiana. She never asked me how I was feeling. Every time she saw me, it was the same routine. "How's the baby?" Each time I felt like answering her cheekily, "I don't know, why don't you ask her yourself?" Every time I brought up the topic of my pregnancy, she had the strange ability to turn the conversation around and make everything revolve around her. Whenever I told her something, she started talking about her own pregnancy story, childbirth, and how she had felt during pregnancy, completely avoiding any interest in my experiences. I even mentioned a couple of times that I was planning to have an epidural, and she responded that I had done it all naturally. I don't trust those things. When I finally gave birth to our son, my mother-in-law began to exaggerate, constantly telling me how I should feed the baby, hold him, change his diaper, and bathe him. It was exhausting. She even wanted to come live with us, telling Robert and me that she could take care of all the maternal tasks. But I objected and told her that he was my baby. I don't know if it was the pregnancy hormones, but I didn't want our baby to be near her. She was very controlling, and I told her that she couldn't come home without an invitation. My husband tried to calm her down by telling her that it was a crucial moment for our baby and that we needed intimacy. In the end, the truth is that I didn't care what he thought because I was too busy taking care of our son. When our son was 2 years old and they offered my husband a better paying job that allowed us to get away from my mother-in-law, we immediately took the opportunity. Although I would have to look for another job and would probably earn less, I didn't care and asked him to accept the offer. Obviously, my mother-in-law didn't like it. Even my father-in-law tried to convince him not to accept the job, but luckily, my husband didn't listen to them, and in the end, we moved away from them. It turned out that once I was away from them, I felt much lighter and happier. Fortunately, we also lived close to my grandparents, which was very good for me because I have always liked spending time with them. I was always working. I took our son to see my grandparents. This was during the time when I was applying for new jobs and interviewing with different companies. My grandmother adored my son, and she made my husband's strawberry pies, which were his favorites, and he couldn't stop talking about how delicious they were. Little by little, I discovered that my mother-in-law hated Robert's close relationship with my grandparents. She got angry every time I mentioned them. Robert and I were busy having a family dinner at my grandparents' house, and she even got irritated when my grandmother baked her delicious strawberry pies. But one day, when I was still looking for a new job, he took them away. He was in a much higher position in his company, so he would not work directly under me. Honestly, we both thought that he would not even get it. But as luck would have it, after several rounds of interviews, he got the position. I was very surprised because he was going to earn even more than in my last job as a manager. Without thinking twice, I accepted the job. I thought that he would be happy too, but it turns out that he never thought that they would give it to me, and he got angry because I accepted it without talking to him. He urged me not to accept the job and told me that I could become a stay-at-home mother. I also responded that I didn't like staying at home and tried to make him see that it was good for both of us to earn money. Over the years, my husband has told me several times that I could leave home to work if I wanted to, because he also earned pretty well. But for me, it was good to get up in the morning with a purpose and earn my own money. Both Robert and I had our own personal accounts, and also a shared bank account that we used to pay bills or daycare. Also, regularly, checks for hundreds of dollars were sent to his mother, which was a little strange, but I kept quiet about it since he was free to do whatever he wanted with his money. Over time, I began to realize how my mother-in-law and father-in-law went on a cruise every 3 months, or she would wear and show off new jewelry on her social media, which made me slowly realize that she was using her son's checks for all of these expenses. Last weekend, we celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary, and since it was a significant achievement, we decided to go all out with the guest list and even hired catering. Everyone, including my parents, our close friends' parents, and some of our co-workers, were invited to the party. When my mother-in-law arrived, she ignored me as usual and went straight to hug Ave and our son as if I wasn't there with them. I smiled politely and walked away to mingle with the other guests. Everyone seemed to be having a good time, and we sat down to dinner. Amidst the clinking of glasses and happy chatter, my mother-in-law stood up, and her voice cut through the jovial atmosphere. "I can't believe that my dear son has been married for 15 years, she announced, causing silence to fall in the room. "It seems like it was yesterday when I taught him the alphabet or how to ride a bicycle." My husband blushed and everyone laughed. She continued saying, "I can't believe I have such an adorable grandson who is little by little becoming a gentleman like his father." She went on to praise Robert but didn't mention me even once, despite it being our wedding anniversary, which I let pass. Typical of her behavior. I guess my parents sensed my frustration because my dad made a toast about how proud I was of my achievements and how I remained a strong, independent woman, providing great examples for our son. With tears in my eyes, I took a sip of my drink, feeling grateful. But my mother-in-law started laughing, questioning what was so great about me, as if all the other women had jobs anyway. I was shocked to hear that, especially after my father's kind words. My mother immediately came to my defense, reminding my mother-in-law that, while it was true all the women had jobs, not all earned as much as I did. She jokingly mentioned that I earned 3 times more than Robert, something rare in couples today. My family immediately raised their glasses in celebration. I felt a bit uncomfortable and signaled to my mother to stop. I understood her intention to defend me, but I didn't want us to stoop to my mother-in-law's level. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law seemed furious and questioned my mother aloud. To diffuse the situation, I told my mother-in-law that my mother was joking and suggested we return to dinner. However, my mother-in-law narrowed her eyes, a sign of her anger. She got up, took a drink, and then loudly declared, "Who do you think you are? My son only married you because you could help him advance in his career. He has always been in love with his childhood friend Gianna, who would have been perfect for him. I don't know why you came into his life. You destroyed everything. You are nothing more than a nobody who married up. You should consider yourself lucky to have a son like mine." The shock rippled through the guests as they felt waves of anger and betrayal. Trying to calm her down, my father-in-law urged her to sit back in her seat, but she refused. She insisted I needed to be taught a lesson. Robert froze in his seat. I asked my mother to escort our son and the other children out, not wanting them to witness the confrontation escalating. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as I put on a smile, looked directly at my mother-in-law, and thanked her, knowing it was the moment I had been waiting for. I told her that if what she said was true, and if Robert was still in love with Gianna after all these years, he was about to receive the biggest surprise of his life. I let her know that not only could I fire her son, given my superior position at work, or make his life miserable, but I could also divorce him and take everything he had since we shared a child. Her expression shifted from disbelief to understanding as I affirmed my strength, making it clear she had no idea what I was capable of. I continued by telling her that once her son lost his job, I wouldn't be able to send her monthly checks for jewelry or vacations. My mother-in-law's face turned red with embarrassment as she tried to intervene, but I couldn't tolerate it. I asked Robert if it was true what his mother had said about him still being in love with Gianna, and he flatly denied it, reassuring me of his love for me. I expressed my frustration with his mother's constant power struggles and made it clear that if he couldn't stand up to her, I was more than willing to leave the marriage. The room remained intensely silent as I gave her my ultimatum. Then, I asked my father-in-law to accompany my mother-in-law out of the house. She started yelling, but Robert intervened, asking her to leave because we had heard enough. My mother-in-law started crying and insulting me, but my father-in-law silently escorted her away. We tried to continue with the celebrations, but everyone was deeply affected by what had transpired. Since the party, Robert and I haven't been on speaking terms. He understands why I said all those things, but he thinks I went a little overboard. I can't stand looking at him, so we slept in different rooms. I guess he might be right in that it might have happened to me with his mother, but I have suffered this torture for the last 15 years. I think I couldn't take it anymore. And there at the party, some bird relatives have contacted me to tell me that I shouldn't have spoken to their mother like that. But they have no idea what I have had to put up with all these years. I don't know if what his mother said was true or not, but I have to talk to him. Update. So we talked. We had a long conversation during which Robert acknowledged that his mother's behavior had crossed some serious boundaries. He expressed his frustration with her actions over the years, admitting that my unexpected response came from pent-up frustration. He also clarified that he had never spoken to Gianna over the years, nor had he even mentioned her to his mother. So he was also surprised that I mentioned her. After so long, I told him firmly that I was tired of seeing his mother obsessed with her ex, and I asked him if he would have liked my parents to do the same with him and compare him to my exes. He understood where I came from, and he apologized profusely, However, he felt torn between his loyalty to me and the deep bond he had with his mother. He told me that he had confronted her about the incident, but that she had not apologized, and he believed it should be I who asked for forgiveness. I decided to suggest that we do couples therapy. I felt that it was very necessary for us at this time, and despite the initial reluctance, he accepted, and we have decided to go to a session next week. Regarding all the comments from the people who wanted me to ask him to block his mother permanently, I think it's something I'll bring up during our couples therapy so we can talk about it and make a decision with the help of our counselor. It's not easy for someone like Robert to just cut off his mother despite how toxic she is, so we will handle this issue slowly. Chakti. It has been 7 months since I last updated anything to my post. For all those wondering, Robert and I are very married. I receive many messages from people asking me to check Robert's phone since they seem to think I might be secretly talking to her. Instead of violating my husband's trust, I decided to contact Gianna herself. It had been years since we had spoken, and we caught up on everything. She was surprised that my mother-in-law would have mentioned her during my wedding anniversary, and she told me a similar story about how her mother was not happy with her husband, Michael, since she got married. I guess my mother-in-law and Gianna's mother are so obsessed with the idea of their children ending up together that they refuse to get over it. Gianna showed me pictures of her adorable twin daughters and assured me that she was very happy in her marriage to Michael. She hasn't been in contact with Robert for a long time, which is exactly what my husband told me. We promised to stay in touch more often, and in any case, I am thinking that our children will meet soon to play together. Robert and I have gotten along quite well since we started going to therapy. We are able to communicate better with each other, and little by little, we are getting back to doing things we used to do before. He gives Carol what he did to his mother-in-law when she kept interfering in our love, but he talks to his father-in-law from time to time. My father-in-law has assured us that he will not allow the mother-in-law to get close to us, and he has kept his word. Our son is doing well at school, and I spend important holidays with my parents or grandparents, and in general, things go well for us.